Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time, we're tackling something I think is really relevant to everyone, the idea of wisdom.
Wisdom, yeah.
And we're going to be using this book, Harnessing the Power of Wisdom, and it's by Andrew Targowski.
Okay.
Now, what I thought was really interesting about this book is that it comes from, an information technology expert.
Oh, wow.
So he's got a very particular lens through which he's viewing this whole idea.
Interesting.
And one of the things that I really like right off the bat is that he says that wisdom isn't just for, like some old philosopher on a mountaintop.
Right.
It's something that anyone can develop.
Hmm.
And he's got these really interesting ideas about how technology can play a role in that.
Yeah, that's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, we often think of wisdom as something, you gain just through living a long time and experience.
Right.
But in our world, with all this data and technology, it seems like Targowski's saying it's more than just time, It's also about how well we can use all that information.
Exactly. And he gives us this really great model for understanding that called the semantic ladder.
The semantic ladder.
Yeah. Have you heard of this?
Oh, yeah, I have. It's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
helpful for understanding, how our thinking works.
Right, like how we move from just basic facts all the way up to, like true wisdom.
Right.
So imagine a ladder, right? At the very bottom rung, you have data,
Okay.
just raw facts and figures.
Right.
So let's say the Dow Jones is at, 10,000 points.
That's true.
By itself, that number doesn't really tell us much.
Yo.
But when we add context to it, then it starts to become meaningful.
Right. And that's when we start to climb that ladder. The next rung up is information, right?
Information, okay.
So let's say, you hear that the Dow Jones just dropped 20% overnight. Suddenly, that data point, that 10,000, becomes, pretty important. It requires action.
Right, now you got to do something about it.
Yeah.
So then what? You've got this information. What's the next step?
Well, that's where concepts come in. You start thinking about, okay, what are my options? Do I sell my stocks to avoid further losses? Do I buy more while prices are low? Or do I just do nothing? Just wait and see what happens.
Right, so you're basically weighing your options, like what are the different paths I could take?
Exactly. But to make a truly wise decision, you need something more. You need knowledge, right? And that's the next rung up on the ladder.
Okay, knowledge.
So this is where your, understanding of economics comes in. Your past experiences with market fluctuations, maybe you've been through this before. Even your intuition can play a role here.
So you're pulling from all your resources, all your experience, everything you know.
Right. You're evaluating the situation as best you can.
Okay, but then the top rung, the top of the ladder, that's wisdom, right?
Yes, exactly.
So what's the difference? How do we get from that knowledge to wisdom?
Well, wisdom is the judgment you make. The choice you ultimately make based on all those lower rungs, the data, the information, the concepts, the knowledge. It's not just about knowing stuff, it's knowing how to apply it to a specific situation.
That's a really important distinction.
Yeah. And here's where Targowski's background in IT gets really interesting.
Okay.
He argues that just as technology has helped us process data more efficiently, faster and more accurately,
Right.
it can also help us to make wiser decisions.
Oh, interesting. So it's like those IT tools can actually boost our thinking abilities.
Exactly. It's like in the past, you might have relied on gut feeling or just limited data to make a decision, like an investment decision. But now we've got these sophisticated algorithms, data analysis tools. We've even got AI, artificial intelligence that can give us insights we might not have seen before.
Okay, so it's like giving our brains a serious upgrade.
In a way, yes. But, Targowski also cautions us that these tools are only as good as the humans using them.
Right. The human element is still key.
We still need to cultivate our own wisdom, our own judgment to make the best use of these advancements.
That makes sense. So it's like we've got these amazing tools at our disposal, but we still need to be the masters of those tools.
Exactly.
Which leads to a big question. If anyone can develop wisdom, who are the wise people in our world who really exemplifies this ability to gather information, to process it, and then apply it effectively?
Well, Targowski tackles this by looking at individuals from all sorts of fields, business, politics, science, the arts. And he tries to analyze what makes them stand out. He doesn't say they had some magic formula or anything.
Okay.
But rather, he sees in them a combination of vision, sound judgment, and the courage to actually act on their insights.
Okay, so like who are some of the people he points to?
Well, he talks about Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart. Walton's big insight was recognizing that rural America was a totally underserved market. And that gap, that need, is what led to the creation of Walmart.
Ah, so he saw an opportunity that others miss.
Exactly. Like he connected the dots in a new way.
Right.
Another fascinating example is Ronald Reagan, the great communicator. His wisdom wasn't just about policies, the actual ideas,
Right, yeah.
but also about conveying them in a way that resonated with people.
Yeah.
He had this remarkable ability to take complex ideas, make them simple, and connect with his audience on an emotional level.
And of course, we can't forget about, folks like Charles Darwin. His meticulous observations, during his travels led to this revolutionary theory of evolution. He wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo, to trust his own observations, even when they went against what everybody else believed at the time.
Precisely. Each of these individuals, in their own way, embodies what we think of as wisdom: insightful observation, sound judgment, and the guts to take action.
Yeah.
But what's really fascinating is that Targowski doesn't limit wisdom to just intellectual prowess. He also emphasizes the importance of character and something he calls the art of living.
Okay, so it's not just about what you know, but also how you live.
Exactly. He says wisdom is about more than making smart decisions. It's about living a life that reflects your values, your understanding of the world, and your commitment to the greater good.
That makes a lot of sense. So how does he define this art of living? What are the key things that make up a wise and fulfilling life?
Well, he outlines several factors, and he brings them to life with these captivating stories from history and his own experience.
Right.
But I think we should save that for part 2 of our deep dive to give you a chance to process everything we've talked about so far.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground already, from that semantic ladder to these, wise people who really put these principles into practice.
Great.
I'm definitely intrigued to hear more about this art of living and how we can all, cultivate these qualities in our own lives.
Excellent. In part 2, we'll get into the more practical aspects of wisdom, how we can apply these ideas to our everyday choices. And we'll also touch on some of the challenges that make it, tough to live wisely in the 21st century.
Welcome back. I'm really excited to dig into this next part of Targowski's book, where he talks about the art of living. We talked about that intellectual side of wisdom, like gathering info and making judgments.
Right.
But how does all that translate into actually, living a good life?
Well, that's a question that's, been around for ages, hasn't it?
Yeah.
What makes a life good?
Yeah.
And I think Targowski's approach is really cool because he connects this ancient search for wisdom to, the realities of our modern world.
For sure. So what are some of the key factors he brings up?
Well, he starts with something that seems pretty basic, being moral and ethical.
Okay.
He says that having a strong moral compass, that sense of right and wrong, it's like the foundation for living wisely.
That makes sense. But in our world today, where it feels like everyone's trying to, get ahead to win, sometimes it seems like ethics kind of get pushed aside. I mean, you hear all these stories about corporate scandals, people cutting corners just to make a buck.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Targowski's getting at. He sees this constant chase for profit as a big challenge to wisdom.
Okay.
He argues that, when short-term gains become more important than the long-term well-being of, everyone, it leads to decisions that can actually be really harmful, not just to individuals, but to whole communities and even the planet.
He gives some pretty, intense examples in the book about, how a small number of companies control, the vast majority of our food.
Right.
And it often feels like they care more about profits than, quality or whether it's sustainable or not.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
He points out that, this focus on industrial agriculture has led to, less small farms, way too many pesticides being used, and more health problems because of, all this processed food. It's like a clear example of how when we make decisions without wisdom, it can have these huge ripple effects throughout society and the environment.
It can be a bit overwhelming to think about,
Yeah.
But I guess being aware of it is, the first step.
Exactly. And Targowski's not trying to bum us out or anything. He's trying to empower us.
Right.
To help us make choices that are, more in line with wisdom.
So, okay, we've got ethics. What else is important for this art of living?
Well, he also talks a lot about the importance of controlling our emotions.
Okay.
Think about it.
Yeah.
How often do we make a decision when we're angry or stressed out or just plain exhausted.
Oh, all the time.
Right. And then later we're like, ugh, why did I do that?
Yeah, or you send that email and then you're like, oh, I shouldn't have sent that.
Exactly. We've all been there.
Yeah.
And Targowski's point is that, real wisdom involves getting a handle on those emotions so they don't, like, totally cloud our judgment. It's not about, pretending we don't have feelings, but more about learning to observe them, to understand them, and not let them completely dictate our actions.
So it's like that saying, take a deep breath before you react.
Exactly. Create some space between what's happening and how you respond.
Right.
Let wisdom have a chance to, catch up.
Yeah.
He even uses Napoleon as an example.
Oh, wow.
Napoleon was this brilliant military strategist,
Right.
but also known for his, explosive temper.
Yeah.
And Targowski argues that, Napoleon's inability to control those emotions ultimately led to his downfall.
That's a pretty powerful example. It
Yeah.
shows how our emotions can, like, sabotage us,
Yeah.
even when we have the best intentions.
Absolutely. And that leads into another element of the art of living that he talks about,
Yeah.
focusing on what truly matters.
Okay.
Targowski, he's big on, making sure our priorities line up with our values.
Mm-hmm.
Talked about Einstein, right?
Yeah.
This incredible mind, focused on his scientific work, but kind of struggle in his personal life. And Targowski suggests that even a brilliant mind like that can get, off track if it's not focused on the things that really matter.
So it's about, like, having a clear purpose.
Yes. Having that sense of direction that guides your choices.
Yeah.
And also being willing to let go of things that don't fit that purpose.
Okay.
Even if they seem, tempting or like what you should be doing.
Right.
Targowski's always reminding us that we've got limited time and energy.
Yeah.
And wisdom means using those resources wisely, right?
It's like that whole idea of simplifying your life.
Exactly.
Not just your physical stuff, but also, like, your mental and emotional clutter.
It's about making space for the things that truly, feed your soul, the things that resonate with your values.
Mm-hmm.
And that contribute to a life of, meaning and purpose.
Okay.
And that brings us to another important aspect, being reflective.
Okay, I get how reflecting on things can help you be wiser, but what does that look like practically?
Well, Targowski is a big fan of us really, examining our own thought processes.
Okay.
Asking ourselves, like, okay, what are my assumptions here? Where did these beliefs even come from?
Yeah.
Am I actually open to seeing things differently?
Right.
It's about having that curiosity, that willingness to learn and grow, even if it means questioning, things you've always believed.
It's almost like you're becoming a detective of your own mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Figuring out how it all works. I like that.
And he even says having a sense of humor can help with wisdom.
Oh, really?
He thinks a bit of laughter.
Mm.
It helps us not take ourselves too seriously, helps us see things more clearly.
I never thought of humor as a path to wisdom, but it makes sense when you think about it. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes you just gotta laugh at how crazy everything is, right?
Exactly. It's about not getting too caught up in our own ego, remembering that, we're all just trying to figure things out.
We're all a work in progress.
Exactly. And that brings us to the final pieces of this art of living that Targowski talks about.
Mm-hmm.
Patience and altruism.
Okay.
He believes that real wisdom involves, acting not just for ourselves, but for the benefit of others too.
That's a big one, especially these days, where it feels like everyone's telling you to, like, look out for number one, get ahead no matter what.
Right.
But Targowski's saying, like, true happiness comes from something different, something bigger than ourselves.
You're right. And it's not about, becoming a saint or anything or ignoring your own needs completely.
Right.
It's about recognizing that we're all connected,
Mm-hmm.
that, my well-being is tied to yours,
Mhm.
to everyone's, and to the planet's.
It's like that we're all in this together kind of thing.
Exactly. And this is where patience comes in too.
Okay.
Targowski believes wisdom means taking the long view,
Right.
understanding that real change takes time and you got to be persistent.
Yeah.
It's about planting those seeds today, even if you might not see them, fully bloom for years.
I'm thinking about all those people throughout history who dedicated their lives to things that, they knew they might not see happen in their lifetime.
Right.
Like those fighting for civil rights or people working to protect the environment.
Those are great examples. They show what it means to have that patience, that commitment to something bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
But while we're talking about challenges, I think we should acknowledge that Targowski doesn't shy away from the things that make it hard to be wise in the 21st century.
This is where things get a bit heavier, right?
Yes, But I think it's important to face these challenges, so we can learn to deal with them wisely.
Okay.
In the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore some of the biggest threats to wisdom that Targowski talks about
Okay.
and talk about how we can, cultivate more wisdom even in the face of all that.
Okay, so we've talked about the semantic ladder, we've talked about that art of living.
Right.
And now it's time to face those challenges to wisdom
Yeah,
that Targowski brings up.
exactly. It's not always easy, especially in today's world.
Yeah.
He's pretty straightforward about the obstacles that can get in the way of, living wisely.
Okay. So no sugarcoating.
No sugarcoating.
Lay it on me. What's
Nah.
the first big challenge?
Well, one of the most significant things he talks about is the power of business interests
Okay.
and how that affects so many parts of our lives. Like, think about politics, education, even our food.
We hear a lot about corporate power and stuff,
Yeah.
but how does that connect to wisdom or the lack of it?
Well, Targowski says that this constant focus on profits, often at the expense of, long-term thinking and ethics,
Right.
it creates a culture that kind of goes against wisdom.
Yeah.
It can lead to decisions that are good for the short term,
Mm-hmm.
but ultimately harmful to people and the planet.
It's like those companies we were talking about before, the ones that control most of our food.
Exactly.
Their decisions are good for their bottom line, but maybe not for the people eating the food or the environment.
Right. He says that this kind of mindset leads to things like factory farming and overuse of pesticides and the production of all this processed food that's not really healthy.
It's a big system
It is,
where
man.
profit comes first and the greater good gets lost.
Yeah, it's a tough reality.
It is, but at least we're talking about it.
Exactly. Awareness is key.
So what other challenges are there?
Well, another big one is the crazy pace of technology these days and all the information that's constantly coming at us.
Information overload.
Information overload. It can be paralyzing.
Yeah.
You're bombarded with so much data that you don't even know how to process it anymore.
Oh, I know that feeling. It's like having a million tabs open in your brain and you can't focus on anything.
Exactly. And that leads to another challenge. He mentions the decline of critical thinking.
Okay.
It's not enough to just have access to information. You have to be able to evaluate it,
Yeah.
figure out what's true and what's not, especially with all the misinformation out there.
It's like all the fake news and conspiracy theories you see online. It's hard to know what to believe anymore.
And that's where that global mind we talked about comes in.
Right.
Being able to step back from your own limited perspective and consider different viewpoints, even if they challenge your beliefs.
So instead of just staying in our own little bubbles,
Yeah.
we need to be open to different ideas and really think critically about the information we're taking in.
Yeah, you got it. It's about developing that intellectual humility. Admitting that we don't know everything and being willing to learn.
Okay, so we've got corporate-grade information, overload, the decline of critical thinking.
Right.
It's a lot. It's kind of depressing, actually. Does Targowski offer any hope?
He does. He doesn't just leave us with all this doom and gloom. He reminds us that even with all these challenges, wisdom is still possible. It's not some magical endpoint you reach.
Right.
It's a journey, a process of constant growth.
So it's like a muscle you have to keep working out.
Exactly.
Right.
And he gives us some practical advice on how to do that. He encourages us to develop those 4 minds of wisdom through learning, through experiences, through reflection.
It's about being a lifelong learner.
Yes.
Always curious, always open to new knowledge.
And he reminds us to practice that art of living we talked about.
Yeah.
Paying attention to our values, managing our emotions, focusing on what really matters.
Living a life of purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A life that aligns with our deepest values.
Yeah.
And he's big on being aware of the things that influence our decisions.
Okay.
The media, societal pressures, even our own biases.
So it's like we need to be more conscious of the things that are shaping our thinking all the time.
Right. We can't just passively absorb everything that comes at us. We have to be active participants in shaping our own minds.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation.
I agree.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of what wisdom means and how to bring more of it into my life.
That's what it's all about, isn't it? Not just learning about wisdom, but actually putting it into practice.
For sure. So to everyone listening out there, as you're navigating this crazy world, remember that wisdom is a powerful tool. It can help you make positive changes in your own life and in the world.
It can.
So keep seeking and keep learning, keep growing.
And may you find the wisdom you need to make a real difference.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.